To AI-ify or not to AI-ify? That's the question. Welcome back to the Business Emergency Room. Today's episode might sound like something out of a Shakespeare meets Silicon Valley scenario, but I think very relevant because let's face it, every conversation, every board meeting, every LinkedIn post, every article, every conference, wherever you go, it seems to circle back to AI. But before you plug another shiny tool in your already overloaded system, we need to talk about one thing. Should you even start? And if yes, where, how, and when?
Leadership today isn't just about scaling. It's about navigating constant uncertainty, market disruptions, and high-pressure decisions. If you're dealing with chaos, bottlenecks, and relentless pressure, welcome to the Business Emergency Room.
Today, it's just me, Maartje van Krieken, here at the Business Emergency Room. We are going to diagnose what's really going on inside your business chaos and figure out how to get you back on your feet fast. Today's topic isn't about what AI can do. I think we've all heard that part. It's more about whether your business is even ready to handle it. Or it's about adding another layer of chaos to an already messy situation, potentially. So let's put your business on the table and run some diagnostics. Let's start with a question. Should you start at all? I think you might know the answer to this, because if the answer is no, we're going to spend a whole episode on that. But let's get something very clear first. If your business is currently on life support, and you're circling the drain, don't start an AI project. Of course you don't. Seriously, just call me first. There is triage work to be done before you start adding new stuff to this whole pile of things that is already moving in the wrong direction. You know if you're in that space, so no. But if you're in what we call the new normal, the state where everything is happening everywhere all at once and everyone's permanently overloaded, yeah, that is the new normal. And yes, you probably should start AI-ifying your business. Why? Because chaos isn't going away. It's just changing form. And as we said, this is the new normal. The trick is to start small, to start smart and structured, and not to replicate the mess or AI-ify the mess you already have. Most of what we see in the media right now is generative AI. So those are the tools that write, draw, summarize, and produce. You probably are using them for social media content. You run into them for customer service and quick creative work. In customer service, you might already also run into what's the next frontier, which is agentic AI. So these are systems that can actually act. They don't just answer questions, they turn their processes, they take action, they trigger workflows, they process data, they send reminders, they update records, they flag exceptions. So here is where the real intelligence is starting to do things for you in your business. And so this is where this gets real. Because suddenly AI isn't a chatbot, it sits in the corner, it's part of your operations, right? You're really embedding it in your finance, your HR, your supply chain, your procurement, your compliance, anywhere. And when AI touches all those areas, your internal mess becomes its mess. And because typically AI facilitates greater connectivity between what are maybe currently more siloed systems and operations, it also propagates mess from one place to the next. So, which means that you have the potential to replicate chaos, really. You multiplying it very fast. More bad news, you've probably heard the horror statistics that 95% of all AI projects fail or to date have failed. Now, let's take that with a grain of salt because it sounds really awful. I'm very cynical about that number because if you think about how long AI has been around, and how for almost all of us, the journey has started not with agentic AI, so truly more with the chatbot space. Most of these projects probably were never really scoped. If you really look at it, the majority of these projects also haven't really had a normal runtime, considering it probably takes minimum 3 months, if not 6 months or 9 months to implement anything, as we know. How much runtime of any of these projects had? The projects we're able to measure today, or were measured for this research, which is from earlier in the summer, is next to nothing, right? And probably a lot of them were from the very early days, and a lot of them were from the type of, let's throw something at the wall and see what sticks. Let's do some experimentation. I'm not sure we can call any of these things projects. So I'm taking that number, as I said, with a grain of salt. I would say, like any change project, like any systems implementation project, this is not so simple. There is room for error. There is room for cutting corners, and then living with poor outcomes at the end. And then the added challenge that this is new and different, right? This is not the 100th or the 1,000th or the billionth implementation of system X, Y, or Z. This is new. So the challenge is in the setup, the framing, the leadership discipline. And like any change project, you need to put in the work, and especially the preparation. And so that's what we're diving into next. What are the things I want you to keep in mind, or the rules I want you to take to heart when you think about AI-ifying your business? Number one, let's just not automate the rubbish. The challenge is, if you automate bad processes, you're not really streamlining, right? You're effectively just cementing dysfunction. And earlier generations of automation typically just carry forward bad data and siloed system. But the problem is that with AI, you're not just doing that, right? So the example is that we've all been part of, at least most of us who are a little older have been part of these automations where there's data sets that needed to be uploaded, and there was certain fields earmarked for data, and then there was batches of data that didn't have that particularly column filled out in the spreadsheet, or we mixed 2 or 3 days and it wasn't consistently done, and we just opted at some point to put it in this extra field the system had. So we're living with that, right? And some of that might be replaced or cleaned up over uses, but some of it may not have. We also all are familiar with quirky reports, right? Quirky things that come out of systems in reports that need manual correction, or fields that have a label that's not sensible for what it really stands for. And within your function, those have just become part of your automated and how you work together. But imagine that if you're now automating that further and connecting it to other systems, and then that data gets sent to other departments who start using it and plugging it into their parts of the system. And they don't have that history, right? They don't have that translation. So this is finance data, for instance, going unseen potentially by a finance person into somebody else's system, who then is going to use it for decision making without having the contextual data. Also, we've had systems that we've bought off the shelf, and that for 80 or 90% did what we needed them to do. But we've also built workarounds in these systems because of limitations these systems had, right? It could only do things in this order, or the process in the system was set up this way, and you had to pay a whole lot extra to change it around. So you decided to go with that. Whilst if it was up to you, you would have done it and structured it a different way, or done it in a different order, or been able to pull reports from it in different points, etc. You don't want to automate the inefficiencies that you learn to live with because of restrictions of a previous system. So that's what I mean with don't automate rubbish, don't automate chaos. You don't just want to say, this is what it does, this is what, here is the stuff that's in it. You take it, whoever's helping you, and AI-ify this. You want to put some thought into this and dig a bit back into the memory as to what was in there and why it was in there and why you're doing certain things the way currently you are. And if you get a choice to change that, would you? You also want some clarity on data ownership, and you want to particularly initially build in some checks, right? To make sure that contextualization of the data isn't lost. You want people to see what the system does and generate and say, hey, we actually need to add logic here because without context, this is actually dangerous, right? Or this leads to the wrong use of it. Which brings me then to rule number 2. If you're going to do this, you need to start where your house is already in order. And typically, that means that you don't want to start with your core operations. On the one hand, you would say, well, out of everything, my core operations should be most in order. But that's also where all the improvement initiatives are, where you're working the hardest, where your value is generated, which are critical to you and the identity of your business, right? It's like as if you're having elective major surgery on your body. Do you really want to start with the heart? Or if you're trying something new, do you want to start at maybe something more on the extremities? I would say start in a support function that is stable, structured, and governable. So as an example, finance is often a first grade candidate. Why? Because there's already a lot of checks and balances in place. There's already a lot of data cleanup, right? Because for auditors and for tax purposes and bookkeeping purposes and for everything, there is perpetual checking of whether the numbers are the numbers. There is already lots of different reports and data shared with lots of different people. And finance is a relatively translatable function between lots of very different business. So that means that there's also plenty of proven AI tools already existing out there. It's a very rule-based environment. And so starting implementation there with something that comes off the shelf might be a really good way to learn fast, to build some confidence, and to also, it's also likely that in the support functions, there might actually be some capacity to work with this, right? Because they're not already running 700 other things or processes potentially, right? That's an assumption. I would make a warning though that if you are using off-the-shelf AI tools, right, and you're not having something too tailor built for you, that you really make sure that you use something that's built and developed to integrate with many others and many other systems. The good news from where I sit is what I'm seeing is that many of the bigger platforms are really saying we want to be able to integrate and interface with everything and everybody. So I do think that that's where the world is going, because that's, of course, the whole benefit of AI, beyond the current systems and structures and setup of more and different systems being able to talk to each other. But just be wary of buying into something where you're now somehow suddenly forever in bed with a company who wants to do everything for you. You want to still have an out if ultimately this is a great business to help you with the finance part of things, but actually they might not be the ones who are best placed to AI-ify other parts of your business or in your type of industries, etc. So pick something that's a bit run of the mill, right? Middle of the road, that plays well with anybody and everybody. And then once you've started there, I would branch out from the next logical interface, right? So that you can start with the next chip you're taking off that block with something where you can start to test that interfacing capability. So maybe then if you would start in finance, the next place to go would be supply chain or inventory management. because the real value in AI is in the single processes. It's how it links between them, but you have to earn your way there a little, right? I think you want to be very wary of how bespoke you want to go. Just like with any other tools and systems, yes, the logic in the processes needs to be yours and needs to suit you. At the same time, particularly if you're early on in the journey, you want to work with parties who have done this in other businesses already, right? You want them to bring the expertise of how, what do you all need to think of, what might you be missing, etc. And so there is some happy balance between how bespoke you go and how market standard you go, or whether you go with somebody who's basically implementing this for plenty of others. And so you're one of many and you have the benefit of cross-fertilization there. I think that's another reason to start with the support processes that are more consistent between various industries and businesses. And as you then progress to your core processes, that final, the heart of the system might be a more bespoke setup, right? So I think there's a sliding scale there of how standardized you go. Which is brings me to rule number 3, that I think it's very important that you ring fence the first project. I've seen ambition kill momentum in 99 of 100 change projects eventually, right? Too many people start with let's integrate all or get excited and bite off too big a piece of the pie. Pick maybe one business unit, one data set, one use case. Particularly the integration of data sets in this is causing a lot of issues. And you want to be careful around the first ones and learn. Because we all know that once things are mixed, it's really hard to unmix them, right? It's like your yogurt and your fruit syrup. Once it's mixed, you can't pull it apart anymore. And so, yeah, you cannot really have an out, but you want to be careful so that if you get burned on that first one, the damage is not insane and you stand a chance of being able to clean up the mess. And you want to be able to understand the logic. So, and where things go wrong and where the propagation of the logic maybe falls off the bandwagon because the contextual the context is missed. So you want a data set big enough that you can test, but you might want to ring fence it too to make sure that it doesn't spin out of control. You want to prove functionality, you want to prove structure, and you want to prove workflow. How much is enough to be able to do that? And then you can spin off a few data cleanup projects because then you know what's the bare minimum that needs to happen before you want to mix new data sets in. It also makes it easier for experienced people to test the outputs. You can pull more people in to test if they don't need a whole background on what's all in this data and if they don't get error upon error or odd outlier upon odd outlier, because that also erodes trust in what the new solution is going to do. So you'll move faster and learn more and make fewer expensive mistakes if you ring fence those first few projects or the first scope. Then rule number 4, you need 2 types of people for your AI projects. You need to find your enthusiasts and you need to find those with the corporate memory. And those might not from day one amazingly work together because they come at this maybe from very different angles, but I think both are critical to the success of your project. What I mean by the enthusiast is that your first AI project isn't just about the skills, it's also very much about the attitude. So you want to give your early projects to the curious ones, right? The people who are already playing with these tools, who are not, maybe after hours or for their personal stuff, but they'll run faster, they absorb the new language quickly, they will have the energy to do this, they are excited about it, which will go a long way about having momentum, they will have the confidence. Clearly, this is something that speaks to them. But then you want to pair these people with what I would call your corporate memory people. So those are the people who really, at a very granular level, truly care and understand why the process works the way it works. What are the various outcomes of these processes that we need and that are critical from the business? And we all know this type. We all have them in our business. The people who really are subject matter experts within their departments, and who will be able to really explain to those developing the system what the logic is that needs to be built in there, or what the safeguards might need to be, and who will be able to review what is being put forward in terms of flowcharts and structures and everything else, and say, hey, hold on, what is the output that comes out? How do I know that that is what I need? Can I see what that output looks like? And then say, no, that's not giving me this, or that only is giving me that. And can really drive the functional requirement of your system. The hard part may be that these people are also somewhat attached to a certain way of things being done. And so pairing them with enthusiasts who are hearing them in terms of what the system needs to do, but then say, hey, we can do this a new or smarter or quicker way. Does it really need, if we get the same outcome, does it really need to be done the old way, or can we build a faster, smarter logic? Because then on top of getting what you're asking for, we now can also get this and this and this and this. So you need the dialogue between the two. You need curiosity and context. And I think the mix between both, that is where the gold will be. And so you're might have to do some active, proactive team building in that space and make sure that those dynamics work. But if you can find both and involve them, I think you're set up in a great way. Then rule number 5, last but not least, going back to that research that says that all those projects failed. Well, I wonder how many of them had a definition of success and measured success, right? You can't manage what you can't measure. And yet, so many change projects, change initiatives, including AI projects, starts without that. If you want support, if you want funding, if you want future buy-in, if you want your first project to roll over to more, you need to show impact. You also don't want to do more work than is needed, get a bigger system than is needed. So you need to define metrics up front. How will you know that this was successful? You need to know what value means for your organizations. But beyond the metrics, you need also to treat every project as capability building. What did you learn? What are you going to do different next time? Which people are going to roll over and be kind of your consistent AI capability building people in your organization? Because your goal is not going to be to just deliver one solution. Is to develop people who are better equipped to lead the next one and the next improvement project. So one of the things I use in that space is something called opportunity framing. I think framing the project is something that you might want good facilitation for, and that you might want to bring some help in for. That's not necessarily help that's going to stick with you for the duration of the project. It could be a good business coach, it could be a consultant, but somebody who will workshop with you effectively before you start what it is you're going to do, helps you with that ring fencing, helps you structure that team. And then you might want to keep them involved a little bit for kind of progress control potentially, or for program management, or maybe you have internal people who can do that. But in the things you want to talk about is the scope, objectives and success criteria, the assumptions, the uncertainty, the constraints, ownership, stakeholder engagement and management. All of these things need to be addressed. And even if you have good project managers, if they've been in your organization a long time, you might want to bring in an outside facilitator to bring a fresh perspective, somebody who's teed up these kind of projects and initiatives before, to make sure that you're as complete as you can be in the structuring of your project beforehand. And even if after the facilitation and the workshop that leaves you with some open questions that you need to address and then work on yourself, you'll be happy that you realize that there's some other stuff that you need to think about or make decisions on before you press start, right? So let's come back to the question: why bother with AI when you're potentially already overloaded or drowning? Yeah, you do need to start, but you need to be careful. Because you're never going to have a calm moment to start. And life in your business will always be busy, but with structure and ring fencing and clear definition of success, you can carve out pockets where AI genuinely adds value, where you can start today without tipping your company further into overload. And the longer you wait, the steeper the climb will be later. So start with purpose, not panic. And if you could use some help teeing things up, you know where to find me. Give me a call. Happy to help. And if I'm not best placed to help you, I'll tap into my network of other specialists and peers and referrals and get you linked to somebody who can. So yes, to AI-ify, totally. Let's get started. Thanks for tuning in to this episode today. I hope to have you back on the next one. Bye.
That's it for this episode of the Business Emergency Room. If you are currently dealing with chaos or disruption in your business, please reach out. You can email, text, or call, and I will find a way to connect with you within 24 hours. I've helped others steer out of the storm, and I know I can help you too. Talk soon. Please like, subscribe, and share.